To solve this product of polynomials, we're going to use the zero property. If we have two things that multiply together to get 0, then one of them needs to equal 0. So let's find the x that makes this one 0 and any x's that make this one 0. To do that, I'm going to set each of these factors equal to 0. So I have here the 5x minus 15 equals 0, and the x squared minus 25 equals 0. Here on the left, let's go ahead and get x by itself. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. That's going to give me 5x equals 15. Sorry about that. Then let's go ahead and divide both sides by 5. And 15 divided by 5 is 3. So here we have one of our answers. If I substitute 3 back in here, 5 times 3 is 15. 15 minus 15 is 0. And 0 times anything is 0. Okay, now let's find the x's that make this one equal 0. We could solve this two different ways. One way is we could continue factoring, because that's a difference of squares. A squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So let's just emphasize the a and the b. The x is being squared, and 5 times 5 is 25. So my a is the x in the formula, and the b is the 5. So if a squared minus b squared, a plus b will be x plus 5, and a minus b will be x minus 5. Now that it's factored, these two multiply together to get 0. So I'm going to set each of those factors equal to 0. So setting x minus 5 and the x plus 5 equal to 0. Add 5, and my x is 5. Subtract 5, and I get negative 5. If I substitute either one of those back in here, it's going to make it 0, and 0 times anything is 0. My final answers are negative 5, 3, and 5. Another consideration when we get to this part here, if you don't want to factor using the difference of squares, then something we could do instead is we can move the 25 to the other side. I'm just undoing the order of operations. So to get rid of minus 25, add 25. To get rid of squaring, I'm going to take the square root. So if I take the square root of both sides, I'm going to get x by itself. But keep in mind when you take the square root of both sides that you get both positive and negative. So using this method, you just have to be careful that you remember when you square root both sides, you get both positive and negative. When you factor, it really highlights that we get a positive and a negative. Let's look at just one more example. In this one, I want to solve, and again, I have two things multiply together equal 0. I'm going to set each of these factors equal to 0. So I'm going to set the 2u plus 14 equals 0, and this quadratic here equals 0. The one on the left is going to be a little quicker to solve. Let's go ahead and subtract 14. And then I have negative 14 there. Divide both sides by 2, and I end up with u equals negative 7. Okay, here I'm going to factor, and I use the x technique here. So the number in front is 1, the number at the end is 14, so 1 times 14 is 14, and 9 goes here. I'm trying to think of two numbers that when I multiply them I get 14, and when I add those two numbers I get 9, and that turns out to be 7 and 2. Okay, over the number in front, so over 1, so this is going to factor to be 1u plus 7 and 1u plus 2. Now that that is factored, then this is equal to 0. So if we have two things that multiply together to get 0, let's set each factor equal to 0. So I end up with u plus 7 is 0 and u plus 2 equals 0. Finish getting the u by itself, subtract 7 from both sides, and I end up with u equals negative 7. And then here, let's go ahead and subtract 2 from both sides, and I end up with positive 2. Oops, that's my bad. That should be negative 2. Let's fix that really quick. Alrighty, and so I have the answers negative 7 and negative 7 and negative 2. We do not need to write down the duplicate, but let's go ahead and fix this one while I'm at it. Okay, so my answers are negative 7 and negative 2.